I just can't keep on going, going, going. I just can't keep on going. I'm falling in love with you. I just can't keep on going, going, going. I just can't keep on going. I'm falling in love with you.
Yo, so we're just doing some basic maintenance items on the CB550 today, and that's timing, the points gap, valve adjustment, and the cam chain tension. So, excuse me, kind of, because this is the first time I'm going through this. This is future Ray speaking, and this is past Ray on the screen about 8 months ago, Ray. So I've gotten way better at doing these processes, and this is the first time I actually did it that you guys are seeing. So if you see some mistakes, feel free to point them out. I don't mind, but just know this was the first time I was doing it. But yeah, let's do it. So I can't stress this enough. Please get some type of book, instruction manual, owner's manual, whatever, for every single vehicle that you own. If you want to do any type of maintenance or repairs, this makes things so much simpler. Right now, as you see on screen, I'm using the Climber manual, but for every bike I get, I usually try to get the Climber, the Haynes, the official service manual. You can usually download that somewhere, and I'll actually get it printed at Staples, or I'll buy the actual version if I can find it for a decent price on eBay, because sometimes they go for like hundreds of dollars, for the original ones anyway. And I just compare those different manuals together, because sometimes some things aren't covered in one, but it's covered in another one, or it's not clear in one and it's crystal clear in another one. So obviously you can always go on YouTube or your favorite forum or Facebook groups to get information, but I find the best way is usually the manual. And if you can't find it there, then go to YouTube or, a forum or something like that. So first up, we have the cam chain tension adjustment, and this is probably the easiest adjustment you can do on the bike. Literally, you take that 10 millimeter nut back there, loosen it, and actually that little kind of screw that's in between the nut, that actually will adjust itself. I believe you have to have the engine at top dead center on the cylinder 1, I believe, when you adjust that. Don't quote me on that. But basically, unscrewing that nut, and then the bolt itself will kind of set itself in place, and then you just tighten it back again. And that's how you do it. That's that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the valve adjustment. A lot of times, if you have a noisy top end of the engine, and I mean noisier than usual, because these older engines do make a little more noise than your newer motorcycle might. But if you do have an extra noisy top end, a lot of the times, not all the time, it could be due to your valves not being adjusted and they're being too tight and or too loose. So basically you have two sets of valves, and there's 8 in total, but the first set are going to be the front, or the ones that are right above the exhaust. And then you're going to have the 4 there in the back, and they're right in front of the carbs or the intake. And those two different valves have two different adjustments. So the exhaust ones up front are going to be 0.08 millimeters, and the intake, or the ones in the back, are going to be 0.05. You do need a feeler gauge to measure that gap. I think I got mine at Harbor Freight. You don't have to spend a lot of money on that. But basically, you're loosening the valve, and then you're screwing in that adjustment nut until you can just get the feeler gauge to just go back and forth. So the first time I did this that you're seeing right now, I had a really hard time trying to figure out how tight the tension is supposed to be on that feeler gauge. But you don't really have to be perfect. You want to get it really close, of course, but just enough so you have some tension when you're pulling that feeler gauge in and out of that gap. I haven't had any issues yet, and I've put hundreds of miles on my bike. So the last maintenance item we're going to work on, for this video at least, is going to be the points. Now, points are something that I've never encountered. All the vehicles I've driven before this Honda were, newer vehicles, newer cars that had fuel injection and electronic ignition. So points was kind of like the old way they did things. actually a mechanical system that operates the point of ignition, the point where combustion happens, basically. So this is something that kind of goes out. The settings kind of get out of tune every now and then, and this bike has been sitting in the desert for forever, so obviously we don't know what kind of state of tune they're in. So the first thing you have to do is actually set the gap between the two sets of points, and that's what I'm doing here. I forget the gap off the top of my head. Actually, I think it's 0.012 inches to 0.016. Don't quote me on that, but it's a range. As long as you're somewhere in that range, you're good. The other part of this maintenance item is timing it correctly. You want that point of ignition to happen when the piston is coming up right at top dead center, and that kind of, goes out of tune after a while. So you're loosening a bunch of these screws and turning this plate until the timing is correct. And how you know the timing is correct is you hook up this timing light, and when you move the plate and when you turn the crank, that light turns on and you're getting it to line up with the fire mark. If this sounds super confusing, it's not really that bad, but if you want to do it on your own, get the manual out. It really breaks it. The climber manual really breaks it down step by step on how to do this. It can get a little fiddly sometimes because tightening the adjustment screw sometimes can actually change the adjustment. So you're kind of going back and forth to figure out where exactly it is. But once you get it and it's dialed in, it'll work great. I thought about getting an electronic ignition for this bike because they do make them for these older bikes, but I wanted to try the points first and kind of get used to that before I jumped into the electronic ignition. And actually, the points have been running good. Again, this is Future Ray. I've been running it for the last year, and it's been fine. You adjust it every now and then, make sure the points aren't dirty, and I've been good to go. So if you have any questions or comments on anything that I did, or if I wasn't clear on something, feel free to leave me a comment. I know some of this stuff wasn't exactly how you're supposed to do it, and because I'm not perfect and I don't know what I'm doing. It was the first time I was doing it. So yeah, any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or if you have a better way of doing something, please let me know. I would love to know. But yeah, thanks for watching. Peace.